Captain Rinn's career in the Navy has spanned almost 3 decades, encompassing challenging positions and a multitude of key operational assignments and combat encounters. As a surface warfare officer, his professional path took him from the rivers of Southeast Asia to command of the U.S. Navy's most sophisticated ships, among them the guided missile frigate Samuel B. Roberts and the Aegis cruiser Leyte Gulf. Captain Rinn was the recipient of the United States Congress's 1989 National Day of Excellence Award, the 1989 Stephen Decatur Award for Operational Excellence, and the 1995 U.S. Navy League John Paul Jones Award for Inspirational Leadership. Ashore, he also served in many distinguished positions. Retiring from the United States Navy in 1998, he joined the international consulting firm of Whitney, Bradley & Brown, and he retired as Senior Vice President for International Domestic Commercial Business Development, and is now pursuing a book, writing and public speaking career. Captain Rinn, though, is truly an example of surface warriors in action as he and his crew work tirelessly to combat the damage caused by a deadly minefield while on board Samuel B. Roberts. Please join me in welcoming Captain Paul Rinn.
Can you hear me out there? Hey, it's exciting to be here tonight. Wait, I got to do this first. Admiral Copeman, distinguished admirals, distinguished guests, fellow surface warriors, how are you? That's a good sign. Hey, I'm here tonight, and I'm honored to be here tonight. And after listening to all these great comments about all that you do, I want to tell you that it's an honor, an exciting honor, to be in the presence of the defenders of the Constitution, the guardians of the sea lanes of the world, and probably more importantly, members of a service that dates back to the birth of our nation. Now, I'm going to tell you that there's a lot of branches of the service that say, you know, surface guys, you know, they don't get excited, they don't carry on. So I'm going to see if that's true tonight. So I want to recognize all of you for the incredible performance you've had this year, for the incredible performance in defending the nation, for your pride in yourself, and I am going to offer 3 cheers to the surface forces of the United States Navy. And if the aviators are right about this, it'll kind of be dull and boring. But you know, aviators, I know there's a few in the room. My wife told me not to tell any aviator jokes, but I can't help myself. You know how many aviators it takes to screw in a light bulb? 1. They stick it in the socket and the world rotates around them. But then a surface guy comes in and says, throw the switch. That's how the lights go on. Okay, so 3 cheers for the surface forces of the United States Navy. Hip, hip. Hooray! Hip, hip. Hooray! Hip, hip. Hooray! All right. Now, I know that some of you out there are saying, Samuel B. Roberts? When did he come? Yeah, man. When did he come in the Navy? How old is this guy? What was the Navy like back then? Was it different? Well, I'm not going to tell you how old this guy is, but I will tell you that when I joined the Navy, it was very different. But so was the world that I lived in at the time. And just to emphasize that point, to let you know how different your world is from the world that I joined the Navy in 1968, I'm going to give you a few facts. Are you ready? It's a little different. The New York Jets won the Super Bowl. Whoa. And the New York Mets followed by winning the World Series. Now that is different. Milk was $1 a gallon. And gasoline was 35 cents a gallon. Cigarettes, 25 cents a pack. A stamp was 5 cents, and they guaranteed delivery in 3 days. For you guys in San Diego, the median price of a home in the United States was $26,999. The median salary in the United States was $7,700. And an ensign in the United States Navy, for all you guys at that table over there, yeah, $4,580. And my daughter said, "You mean a month, right?" I said, no, a year. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed on December 31st, 1968 at 980. There were no laptops, there were no desktops, there were no iPhones or iPads. And when you dialed a number to call somebody, a human being answered the phone and did not say, "Your call is very important to us, please hold the line," because he couldn't put you on hold. He gave you an answer, and he didn't play music that you didn't want to hear. The Navy had 996 ships. Yeah. 313 destroyers, and Gearing-class destroyers carried about 1,100 rounds, but that only lasted about 2.5 weeks on the gun line off of Vietnam. We had Tartar, Terrier, and Talos as weapons, and missile shoots were pretty exciting back then, and not in a good way. Pers tempo and op tempo were kind of advisory, and it wasn't uncommon to be deployed for 6 months and have it slide to 9. We shot sunlines, morning stars, local apparent noon, and stars at night, because there was no sat-nav, Omega, and Loran Charlie was just around the United States. We communicated by letters and over ham radio, where you often said to your wife, "I love you, dear, over," and sometimes she didn't hear the front end of it, and you would get back, "What do you mean it's over?" IAs were not called IAs. You were just told it was a career-enhancing billet to go to the Mekong River. So the Navy was different. In many ways, it was different. But there was one constant then, as there is today, then and now, and that's the lifeblood of the United States Navy, the remarkable and dedicated individuals who have that drive to excel every day and get the job done. And that is the American sailor. The men and women who come to work every single day and keep the guns firing, the missiles shooting, the combat systems purring, and the engineering plan charging along. It's the incredible factor in the United States Navy that makes us the greatest Navy in the history of the world. So tonight, to emphasize all this, I want to tell you a story about some average sailors, because by definition, you have great sailors on your ships. Everybody does. You know, the Kidd, the Roberts, all of you have great sailors. And I could tell you those stories, and you'd say, "I got guys just like that." But I want to talk to you about average sailors, because by definition, most of your sailors are average. But they are the ones that make the difference. And they are the ones that you must invest in to get them to invest in themselves, because then the dividend is incredible. So I'm going to tell you the story of 2 sailors that are particularly important to me, who are crew members of my ship on Samuel B. Roberts. There's a lesson in this. First one is RM3 Gary Jackson. Gary Jackson is a radioman on board Roberts who brings me my traffic every morning. Gary Jackson's 15 pounds overweight, and everybody's concerned that he won't pass the PFT. Gary Jackson struggles with his DCPQS, and he can't get height of metacenter and metacentric height right, and he struggles with all of that. But every day he shows up in my staterooms, as a devoted sailor, brings the traffic, has really got the right spirit, is intense, and tells me he's going to get it right. In fact, he tells me one day that he's volunteered to be on the quick reaction team. It's a thing we had on the FFGs back then. You had repair 2, repair 5, repair 3, and if they were stretched to the limit, you had a quick reaction team that would jump in and go to the places of damage. You never really expected to get there. We were on our way to a destiny to use it. So Jackson decides and tells me, Captain, I'm going to get this damage control stuff right, and I'm going to be on the quick reaction team, and I'm going to get my weight down. And when he walks out of my stateroom that day, I'm really pleased, but I wonder how Gary Jackson, RM3, is going to do. The second individual that I want to tell you about, if you were grading him on a grade scale, somewhere between D and F. And his name is Michael Tilley from a small town in Missouri. First time I see Michael Tilley, Fireman Tilley, is a captain's mast. We have a pre-com crew, and Tilley is brought before me because Tilley, who looks like 15 years old, went into a bar one night with 2 ID cards saying he's 28 and 29. The bartender refused to serve him, and the shore patrol takes note of it, and Tilley now stands before me. The Master Chief of the command thinks he needs just a good talking to, but he's not sure Tilley's going to make the grade. His department head says he's a good guy, and the XO says, not sure. So I give Tilley that standard, all you commanding officers, you know it. You've disgraced the Navy, you've disgraced your ship, you've embarrassed us, don't ever do this again. I fine him, give him extra duty, and I am convinced as a commanding officer, I will never see Tilley again at mast. Wrong. Weeks pass, ship is commissioned, we go out operational. We are very successful, shoot a lot of things down with missiles and guns, and we get sent into a port visit in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. And now, Fireman Tilley, who seems to be out of trouble, and has been working hard, by the way. Every time I see him, he's got a smile on his face and really putting out. He goes to Blackbeard's Castle with 5 of his friends. And at Blackbeard's Castle, he has a few beers, and he decides he has to go to the men's room. There's a line outside the men's room. Tilley sees bushes out in front of the restaurant. And he goes outside and he looks at those windows that are right in the restaurant and sees the mirrors and thinks there's mirrors on both sides. Tilley appears before me shortly after that. I think you've got the picture on this. And now, the Master Chief of the command is almost certain that Tilley is the guy who's going to drop the projectile in the magazine, drop the wrench into the diesel, fall over the side. Captain, I think it's time to maybe move Tilley out. And the XO says, Captain, you know, maybe you ought to think about this. Well, I take Tilley to mast and I give him a talking to, but I just have this sense that he's a young kid who just can't make a good decision, but he's a good shipmate and he's a good man. And I wonder what I have to do and what his department and division also have to do to right the ship and get him going in the right direction. I'm pretty sure that we can do that. And I won't see Tilley again at mast. Yeah, you're right. We're operational for about 6 months down in the Caribbean, doing some drug busts, shooting missiles. Everything's going really well, and then one day I get the news, you're going to deploy 7 months early to the Persian Gulf to convoy tankers and to chase some Iranians. Ship's doing well. We've got 6 weeks to get ready. It's just before Christmas. Come back to Newport, Rhode Island. Divide the crew in half. First half goes and I tell them, hey everybody, got to be back on the 26th of December. Don't screw your shipmate, be back on time. Everybody get it? Yes, sir. Who doesn't come back on time? Tilley, very good. And this time, Tilley appears before me at mast and the Master Chief says, this is it. Got to go, Captain. He is definitely going to be the guy that's going to do us in. And the XO says, you know, I fully concur. And I'm just about to sign the piece of paper to put Tilley out of the Navy. And he says, Captain, Tilley, by the way, was 9 hours late coming back. He said, "Captain, can I speak?" And I said, "Sure, Fireman Tilly, what is it?" He said, "I don't know my father. Please don't throw me out of the Navy. I don't know my father. My mother's an alcoholic. My girlfriend broke up with me, stole my car. My dog ran away. That's why I'm late." And behind me, my XO hears this story, and I hear him say, "Oh no, I know where this is going." I don't put Mike Tilly out of the Navy because I believe that there's something in there, in that sailor, that will do something good for the United States Navy. My chain of command thinks I've lost my mind or that he has pictures of me doing something. But the reality is, I think there's a future of him, and I don't throw him out of the Navy. In 29 years of naval service, over 200 days of combat, 21 years at sea, it is the wisest decision I ever made. Because if I threw Mike Tilly out of the Navy that day, I wouldn't be here tonight because I would be dead, and so would 200 and some odd members of my crew. So you want to hear the story? You want to hear the rest of the story? All right. Samuel B. Roberts deploys to the Persian Gulf. And during that operation, the time, over 3.5 months, we are intensely operational, only 3 days in port. And our job is to do convoys, and we do 14 of them, convoy commander for 11. And the rest of the time, Mideast Force orders us to go after the Iranians, who are averaging 8 attacks a week on tankers and small craft in the Straits of Hormuz and the southeastern part of the Gulf. Don't start the next war, but disrupt them and interfere with them. So we do that. We chase them down, we run them around, and we reduce the number of attacks down to about 1 a week. And I think we've really pissed them off. And if you don't think it's exciting to run by somebody with a relative speed of about 60 knots, 200 yards apart, he's going one way and you're going the other, you haven't really lived. And for the fighter guys, we know what it's like to be there with the missile on your rail, chasing somebody down. So we are successful. And during that time frame, Fireman Tilly comes back to my attention. And he sends me a note in my suggestion box. Now, my suggestion box was something that I had because invariably sailors have great ideas. And I kept them all, numbered them, so they wouldn't disappear, if you know what I mean. And in one, Tilly puts in a note, and it says this: "Captain, since we've been deployed to the Persian Gulf, I'm in port and starboard, and all my guys down here never get to see the light of day. Don't you think it's possible to put a porthole in the main engineering space?" Senior Chief thinks Tilly's being disrespectful. I think Tilly's being Tilly. When you go into Fireman Tilly's space, AMR-1, you could eat off the deck. Everything works. All the cards are in the right place. All the machinery is there. Everything is right. Fireman Tilly is doing his job. This is his personality. What does it take to get him to be where he needs to be? So I take the porthole letter, stick it in my pocket. I think it's pretty funny, and time goes on. And that operational tempo that I told you about happens. 14 April 1988 is a day that I will remember for a long time, probably till the day I die. 37% fuel on board, finishing a convoy to Kuwait. We're heading at 28 knots to rendezvous at USS Seattle, who has just started to come to the Straits of Hormuz. I'm in my cabin complaining to the chief cook about too much spinach on the menu. True story. And as we make a hard starboard turn and come around Gutter, right at the Shah al-Arum shoals and Rashdam oil fields, and sitting in my cabin, and you all know what the sound of your ship sounds like, all of a sudden it starts to vibrate. And the phone rings, and I hear the word mine on the phone, and I'm on the bridge. And in front of me, as the ship stops, are 2 mines, one off the port side, one off the starboard side, 400 yards in front of the ship. And another one out the starboard bridge door, 300 yards. I assume immediately that we're in a minefield. Don't know what the size of it is, don't know how dangerous it is, but I do know that I've got a great crew. And I do know that we know how to drive the ship, and I also can see my wake about 5 miles behind me. So I get on the 1MC, and I pass the word for everybody to get up above the main deck, to set general quarters. We're already at modified general quarters, and we're at hatches down, scuttles open, get up above the main deck, and set zebra, and we're backing out, and we're gonna back away. We call Mideast Force, tell them where we are, 400 in front, 300 on the beam. Their response, don't get any closer than 1,600 yards. Not too helpful. When we're in position and the reports are coming in, I get ready and I start to back the ship. Down in AMR 1, Mike Tilley makes a decision with complete disregard for his own life and thinks, we don't use #1 diesel very often, but if we get hit with a mine, maybe we're gonna need it. Tilley gets on the SoundPod phones and reports to the bridge, I'm leaving AMR 1. And then he closes the hatch, dogs it down, and stays there because he thinks it's a moment that we might need the ship. We start backing, and about 18 minutes into the backing, the largest explosion that I have ever seen in my naval career takes place. Now, I've been through a 1.5 high howitzer attack. I've seen B-52 strikes. But if you're standing on the bridge of your ship looking aft, and the after end of your ship blows up in the air about 20 feet in front of you, and you're 146 feet from the explosion and it breaks your left foot, and the flames are 100 feet above you, and when it comes down, the bow watch that spotted those mines originally catapults out of his bow seat and lands back by the missile launcher in a complete pike position. You've seen a pretty good explosion. In seconds, we go from a 4,000-ton ship to a 6,000-ton ship. We're on fire, and we are sinking, and we are in trouble, and it's 5 minutes before sunset. And the sharks and the sea snakes are coming because guess what? They hear the noise and they think it's a festival. So we're in trouble, and we have to assume, or we have to figure out very rapidly what has happened to us. Communications internal to the ship by those sailors has been brought back online almost immediately. So I get reports that are almost unbelievable to hear, that everything horizontal on the ship is shattered and fractured, broken. That the main engine room is gone. Both gas turbines are destroyed, and the hoppum that was on the keel is now stuck in the overhead 27 feet above it. AMR 3 is gone. 2 main spaces, not much room to spare. What's our power situation? We got 4 diesels, one's dead, it's been blown to pieces. One's fractured and the oil is pouring out of the bottom of it. #2 diesel's keeping us going. We gotta get #1 diesel on the line. Can't get there, Captain. There's no way to get to AMR 1 right now, but we're working it. After a few minutes, we get things settled out. My first concerns are my casualties. How many do I have that are dead? Reports come in, we have not lost anybody. We have a lot injured, about 60 wounded, but we haven't lost any. Second determination is there was an Iranian frigate trailing us, and there was an Iranian P-3 to the south of us. I'm not going to let them take our ship. The Navy doesn't give you a ship to give up to those guys. So we warn them off. We tell them if they close us inside of 10 miles, we'll shoot them. And we get a missile up on the rail, managing it with our power as fast as we can. And the P-3 flies away, and so does the Iranian frigate, the Sabalan, turns and moves away. So now it's time to battle for our lives and save the ship. We don't know how many mines are in the minefield. Obviously there were 4, turns out there were 14. And we've got to get out of it on our own, because when I talk to the Mideast Force commander, he tells me the nearest ship is 147 miles away. Coming, but the mine danger area is 10 miles around the ship. So I leave my XO on the bridge, and now those 2 guys that I've told you about come into play. The crew is performing magnificently, as they always do, as our sailors always do. And as I go through the ship, I'm encouraged by what they're doing, but we're losing the battle even though we're doing everything right. And I walk down and I see what's happened in the main engine room, and I see what's happened in AMR 3, and I decide I better go look and see what's happened in AMR 2, because the fast reaction team remember Petty Officer Jackson? The fast reaction team has gone down to that space to save it. Repair 2 is engaged. Repair 5 is fighting fires. Repair 3 is doing shoring back aft. So as I turn the corner to go on to Repair 2, I run into RM3 Gary Jackson, the guy in the Fat Boy program, the guy who couldn't get his weight off. And I see him walking into AMR 2 with no clothes on, only his skivvies and docksiders with a mattress tucked under his arm. Now you might think, it's a pretty unusual situation. And I did. And I was about to say, Jackson, and he looked at me with that look like, I'm busy, and headed down into the space. And so I followed Jackson into the space where there was only 2 other sailors, a postal clerk and a bosun mate. And the water on the lower level of in that space was up to our knees. And I realized when I got down there what Gary Jackson, the kid who hadn't been able to pass his damage control quals, had done. He was the first man in the space on the quick reaction team. He looked up and saw 2 holes double the size of basketballs, and the fact that the space was cracked across completely and the water was pouring in. He realized that the 2 fire pumps in the space were the only ones left to save it, and he grabbed all the toolboxes, shoved them in the hole, and then ripped off his clothes and grabbed everything else he could and plugged the holes. And in essence, Gary Jackson, by stopping that flooding in that space when he did, saves those fire pumps and is the first step in saving Samuel B. Roberts. Now he goes up and he tries to pound oakum into the cracks. But when he does, the water pours in even bigger than before. And his damage control training told him that means that there's nothing but water on the other side of that bulkhead. So he makes a command decision. I ought to use mattresses. Whose place is the closest? The chief's. And he goes up and grabs the postal clerk, and they start bringing down mattresses. And so when I get there, there's Gary Jackson slapping mattresses up on this crack, having stopped the flooding, and essentially shutting down all of the flooding that's there. And after about 5 minutes in the space, I gather them all together, and now it's the chief cook who I was complaining about spinach. He's leading the team. Gary Jackson, a postal clerk, a bosun mate, and an NI seaman. Those are the guys in that engineering space that are fighting to save it because everybody else is doing another job. And I said to them, I'm going to tell you this straight. You've got to save this space. You've got to save that bulkhead, or we're going to go down, and you're going to die right here. And I'm not trying to scare you. I just want you to know that this is what you're playing with. And if you can't do it, I have to replace you. If you ever have any doubts about our people, about the youth of America, forget it. Those guys looked at me and said, hey, Captain, we got this. You got other things to worry about. We'll save this space. Now, I said, okay, and I turned to leave, and as I was turning to leave the space, I honestly wasn't sure I'd ever see them alive again. But there was a legend that went on board Samuel B. Roberts, and it went something like this. Captain Rinn fears no man, but what he fears is that he'll come home some night and find one of us in the driveway with one of his daughters in a Trans Am listening to a Journey tape. And so as I was leaving the space, one of them put a boombox on top of a refrigeration unit and put in a Journey tape. I had to stop and go back and tell them that even now their taste in music sucked. So, Gary Jackson. As I was leaving the space and realizing the desperate need place we were for power, what I didn't know was that the battle was going on, and this is what was happening on another part of the ship. I was about to discover it. First of all, back in CCS, Master Chief Walker, our EL, was there with the chief engineer, desperately trying to figure out how to maintain the electrical load. He had a problem. The EPSI panel was dead, but the lights in the space were on. Innovation. Walker turns to GSM Donovan and says, Donovan, take the vacuum cleaner and cut off the extension cord. Donovan says, okay. And he said, then splice it into the back of the EPSI panel. So he splices in the back of the EPC panel, and he says, now go around and stick it in every plug in CCS until you find one that works. Donovan looks at Walker and says, can we do that? And Walker says, there's nobody damn well down here to tell us no. So he plugs it in, and the third socket he plugs it into, the EPC panel comes on. And Walker now can control the load and fight to hold us and not have a ground or a short knock the electrical load off the line, because we have no ability in the 2 diesels and AMR2 to start it. Those HP air flasks are in the main engine room below the water, and they are destroyed. And so while Walker is looking at the board trying to figure out what he's going to do and how he's going to get number 1 diesel started, the buzzer sounds from AMR1. And he answers the phone, and a voice at the other end says, hey, CCS, this is Fireman Tilley up in AMR1. What do you want me to do with this diesel? And Walker's response is not printable. So Tilley, up in AMR1, remember, 3-mast case, Tilley? Up there by himself, turns around and says, I've never started a diesel before. Walker says, well, it's time to learn. Pick up the EOS card. So Tilley goes into the enclosure, and with an EOS card that he has never used before, sets up the diesel, number 1 diesel, and then climbs up on top of it and realizes that the governor is shattered, and that to start that diesel, he will have to open up the 1,500 PSI manifold in the space and take that air to the governor and start it by sticking a screwdriver into the opening valve. If the governor carries away, there will be no more Mike Tilley. There will be not much left of him. But Tilley decides this is what he stayed for. He opens up the flask, brings air to the governor, and in a second sticks the screwdriver in, and it sounds like the zzz, bam, and the diesel starts. Mike Tilley starts a diesel. And he climbs down off it and normalizes it. Then he calls Walker and says, I got it started. Hey, great. Now what do you want me to do? Walker tells him to bring it to the switchboard. Until he goes out and picks up another EOS card and starts to figure out how to bring power from the diesel to the switchboard. And when he finally gets it all lined up, and the oscilloscopes are turning in the counterclockwise direction almost to midnight hour, Mike Tilley reaches up and throws the switch that brings the power from number 1 diesel to the switchboard. In essence, Fireman Mike Tilley, 3-mast cases, the kid whose girlfriend stole his car, saved Samuel B. Roberts. And why do I tell you that story? Because that night there will be lots of heroic things that will happen. There will be sailors fighting fires. There will be guys saving other sailors' lives. There'll be great leadership from the chiefs, magnificent leadership from the chiefs and the officers. But the sailors were magnificent. And it wasn't the top guy. It was somebody that you had to invest in so that he would invest in himself and become the dividend that we all benefit from. We got out of the minefield that night because of the power that Mike Tilley gave us. We fought the fires. We finally got them out. 5 hours, but we got them out. We dewatered the spaces, and eventually we lit off our APUs, picked a course, which I have no recollection how I came up with it, and went 146 out of the minefield. 13 mines left in the minefield. We drove between 2, separated by 200 yards. We went 26 miles before the tug got us in the morning to get us to Dubai. It was a great feat and a great performance, but it was done by a sailor in the United States Navy who was fearless and did his job extremely well. There were many acts of heroism that night, as I said. But when we got to port, the one thing that I wanted to tell you about Tilley was that he had a tremendous sense of humor. So after we ended up in Dubai, and they put us in a 1 million deadweight ton dry dock, and we being only 4,000 tons. I went out on the pier to take a look at the ship and see what the condition it was in. Navy's newest ship, Navy's youngest commanding officer. It's about $95 million worth of damage. Not so great. And I'm sitting on the side of the dry dock, and out of the corner of my eye, coming towards me is the Master Chief of the command. Sort of like the Wizard of Oz. And he has a piece of paper in his hand, which I still have to this day. And as he walks up to me, he says, "Captain?" I said, "What is it, Master Chief? What is it now?" And he said, "It's that damn Tilly." Now, I have to tell you this. Nobody knows that Tilly stayed down in the space and did the diesel. Walker thinks Tilly, got his way down there after the explosion. Tilly doesn't tell anybody he stayed in the space because he thinks, remember, Tilly, one more mistake and you're out of the Navy, you won't even come and see me? He thinks if they find out that he disobeyed orders and stayed down in the AMR-1, he'll be thrown out of the Navy. So Tilly ain't telling anybody he was down there. So I get this note, and I open it up, and as I said, I have it to this day. To Captain Rinn from Fireman Tilly. Captain, oh, by the way, the hole is 30 feet wide in the ship. No keel, 30-foot hole. To Captain Rinn from Fireman Tilly. Captain, with regard to a request for a porthole in the main engineering spaces, you have exceeded my wildest dreams. You're a great crowd for an old man. Listen, today, you all are serving in a very challenging time. But I am confident, I am very confident, you will continue to do your job with spirit, with excellence, and with the incredible professionalism you have demonstrated and all of those who have gone before you have demonstrated. Be bold. Be bold. Be ethical. Be passionate about your profession because it is a profession, not a career. Your nation admires you, and they depend on you. The world, the entire world respects you. You know, as a consultant and traveled all over the world in the company that I worked for, and every place I went, all they talked about was the United States Navy, the surface Navy, the Navy that comes to stay, the Navy with the heritage back to the birth of our country. So the world respects you for what you represent. Carry the surface Navy torch with pride wherever you go. Be proud of yourself as we are proud of you. Good luck. Godspeed you on your journey. God bless you.